Welcome back to the Deep Dive. I'm your host, and today, well, we're diving into something that's been making major headlines. Think about this. February 2025. Illegal entries between border checkpoints. Down. Way down, like 94% compared to the year before.
Yeah, it's a pretty staggering statistic, and our sources connect this directly to the policy shifts right at the start of the Trump administration in January 2025. Declaring that national emergency, sending troops. It was a very different approach compared to the previous few years.
A really different approach. Because before that, under the Biden administration, the sources we looked at describe, well, a historic crisis. We're talking over 11 million encounters by CBP Customs and Border Protection in just 4 years.
And that's not even counting the gotaways, right? The estimate is around 2 million people who were detected, but, well, slipped through, disappeared into the country.
Yeah, and some analyses we read link those previous policies directly to issues like criminal gangs getting a foothold in U.S. communities, public safety concerns popping up nationwide.
It's a serious point raised in the materials.
What's also interesting, though, is seeing how the conversation is changing, even in places you might not expect. Like Massachusetts. Their Democratic governor, Maura Healey. She recently indicated support for arresting illegal immigrants who commit crimes, saying she supports the apprehension of criminals in our communities. That's quite a statement, considering she'd previously promised to fight Trump's deportation efforts.
It does suggest, maybe a broad recognition of the need for enforcement, or at least a shift in how leaders are talking about it when faced with the realities.
Right, so what if these border changes aren't just politics as usual? What if they're actually reshaping the safety, the economy of your community right now? Today, we're going deep on immigration policy impacts. We'll look at the money side, who wins, who loses for American workers. We'll look at the rule of law challenges. And we'll unpack the reforms being proposed that, according to the sources, aim to put American citizens first. We've got the sources. Let's figure out what they tell us.
Let's do it. To really get it, we kind of have to look back at the Biden-Harris years first, 2021 to 2024. Our sources frame this period around policies of openness. President Biden, on day one, basically January 20th, 2021, signed orders that rolled back a lot of the previous administration's border measures.
And this wasn't out of the blue, right? He'd signaled this. I remember seeing sources mentioning a 2019 debate where he talked about surging resources for asylum seekers and tweets about ending Remain in Mexico, stopping wall construction.
Exactly. Then the administration leaned into things like the CBP One app, for processing asylum claims, and set up these mass parole programs. Critics argued these programs essentially created pathways for people who wouldn't normally qualify for legal entry, inadmissible aliens, as the sources term them.
And didn't the DHS Secretary, Mayorkas, also issue guidance limiting ICE enforcement?
He did, and he publicly stated unaccompanied kids wouldn't be turned away. Now, the sources we read include critiques arguing this basically acted like an advertisement for cartels, a dangerous incentive, they claim.
The numbers that followed were, well, huge. Those 11 million CBP encounters in 4 years.
Historic numbers, yeah. And over 550,000 unaccompanied children encountered. That's a vulnerable group.
And DHS reportedly lost track of, 300,000 of them? It's deeply concerning.
It is. And during this time, you see those reports, those claims of our sources about criminal gangs spreading, leading to that idea that every state essentially became a border state.
The courts were swamped too, right?
Oh, absolutely. The immigration court backlog exploded. By October 2023, sources say it was over 3.7 million cases. Imagine trying to process that fairly and efficiently. It's nearly impossible.
Okay, so that sets the stage for January 2025. Trump takes office, and according to our sources, it's an immediate sharp turn.
A complete reversal. National emergency declared, troops deployed, wall construction restarts, those parole programs ended, catch and release terminated, just boom, boom, boom.
And the effect?
Almost instant, based on the data in our sources. February 2025 sees that massive 94% drop in illegal entries between ports compared to the year before. Apprehensions hit record lows.
Wow. And ICE arrests
increased significantly. Arrests of public safety threats jumped by 627%, according to the reports we have.
And what was that about sanctuary cities? Even places like Boston.
Yeah, that's a fascinating detail from the sources. Reports surfaced that some Boston police officers were kind of secretly, helping ICE arrest criminal illegal aliens going against local sanctuary policies.
Really? Defying local policy.
Seems so. And the acting SCE director, Todd Lyons, apparently confirmed this kind of cooperation was happening and vowed to, quote, flood the zone in sanctuary jurisdictions, basically pour in federal resources.
Okay, so that's the enforcement picture. Let's shift gears a bit to the economics. This is always a huge part of the immigration debate, isn't it? Who benefits? Who pays?
It really is. And the sources we looked at lay out some clear arguments. On the winner's side, often the very wealthy, think large stockholders benefiting from overall economic growth, however small the net contribution might be.
And employers, I assume. Businesses?
Definitely. Especially in sectors that rely heavily on manual labor agriculture, meat packing, landscaping, construction. The argument is access to immigrant labor keeps labor costs down, boosting profits. And, of course, the immigrants themselves often see significant economic gains compared to their home countries. They send money home remittances, which is huge for those economies, too.
Okay, so that's one side. But the sources also point to downsides, particularly for American citizens, right? Who are the losers, according to these analyses?
Generally, the sources suggest it's poorer Americans, working-class folks. They argue that a large influx of labor, especially lower-skilled labor, can drive down wages in certain sectors. It can also potentially increase unemployment for native-born workers in those same fields and weaken the bargaining power of unions.
Do the sources single out any specific groups?
Yes, they often point to African Americans being disproportionately affected in less skilled job markets facing lower wages, reduced employment rates, and some studies even link it to higher incarceration rates in those sectors. And it's not just native-born citizens, even previous waves of immigrants can face renewed competition when new waves arrive.
So what about the big picture, the overall economy? Does mass immigration significantly boost GDP?
Well, the sources we consulted suggest that while it does increase the labor force and add consumers, the net contribution to U.S. GDP growth is actually pretty small, maybe around 0.2% annually.
Not a huge number.
Not huge, no. And the argument presented is that this small growth primarily benefits the wealthy, which can actually increase economic inequality within the U.S.
Okay, let's tackle that common phrase, jobs Americans won't do. What do our sources say about that? Is it a myth?
Many of the sources really push back against that idea. They bring up examples like a crackdown on illegal workers in construction in Fort Collins, Colorado back in 2006.
What happened there?
When the illegal labor supply dried up, wages for the legal immigrant workers actually went up. The implication being, if you tighten the supply, wages adjust. People will do the jobs if the pay is right.
So the market responds.
That's the argument. One source even quotes a drywall business owner saying flat out they're taking over our jobs because companies know they can hire undocumented workers for less.
It suggests a choice is being made, maybe implicitly.
Exactly. Some economists cited argue that if the U.S. really needed certain workers and could only find them domestically, we wouldn't tolerate things like failing inner-city schools. We'd invest in our own workforce. The sources imply the current system sometimes uses immigration as a way around making those domestic investments.
A provocative point. Okay, moving from economics to the rule of law. Enforcement and accountability seem key here in the sources.
Absolutely. There's a strong focus on judicial accountability, for instance. Calls for judges to apply federal immigration law consistently, not based on personal feelings.
Is there an example of that?
The case of Massachusetts Judge Shelley Joseph comes up. Back in 2018, she and a court officer were accused of helping an illegal immigrant with a prior deportation order evade an ICE agent waiting for him. Allegedly, she ordered the courtroom recorder turned off and let him slip out a back door.
Wow. And the argument against that?
That judges aren't above the law, and that federal immigration law under the Constitution's Supremacy Clause overrides state or local preferences when it comes to enforcement.
Which connects directly to the whole sanctuary cities debate.
Precisely. These are local policies limiting cooperation with ICE. Opponents, like the group America First Legal mentioned in our sources, argue this is dangerous, releasing deportable criminals locally. AFL apparently even sent warning letters to officials in nearly 250 sanctuary jurisdictions, reminding them of potential legal liability.
So if enforcement is the goal, what tools are proposed in the sources?
Mandatory E-Verify is a big one, making that electronic system mandatory for all new hires nationwide. The idea is to turn off the jobs magnet for illegal immigration.
And it applies to everyone, so less chance of profiling.
That's the argument, yes. Universal screening. Plus, they call for really strict sanctions on employers who do hire undocumented workers, big fines, even potentially jail time for executives. hitting the demand side.
What about the legal consequences for non-citizens themselves?
The sources emphasize how serious even minor criminal convictions can be. They can trigger deportation, permanent exile. It's described as having disastrous and irrevocable consequences. And the definition of what counts as a conviction for immigration purposes is federal and has actually broadened over time, sometimes retroactively. It's complex.
And there's that mention of the Alien Enemies Act. That
Yeah.
sounds old.
It is, from 1798. But sources report the Trump administration invoked it to target specific groups, like the Tren de Aragua gang, basically deporting alleged members to places like El Salvador's mega prisons. Critics raise due process flags for sure, but proponents see it as using every legal tool available for national security, an assertion of authority.
Okay, so that's enforcement. What about broader reform proposals mentioned in the sources? What's the vision there?
A key theme is reducing overall legal immigration numbers significantly, from over 1 million per year down to maybe around 300,000.
How would they achieve that kind of cut?
Several ways. Refugee levels would stay around 150,000, but sources say the definition would be tightened strictly political refugees, not economic or climate migrants.
What about family-based immigration?
Big changes proposed there. Limit sponsorship primarily to spouses and minor children. Get rid of categories like adult siblings, parents. Essentially ending what critics call chain migration. Employment visas would also be reduced, prioritizing American workers first, and the diversity visa lottery discontinued entirely. Sources argue it gives false hope and isn't needed if other reforms happen.
And for those already here undocumented, what's the approach?
The sources are clear. Strong opposition to blanket amnesties. The argument is that amnesties just encourage more illegal immigration down the line.
And the birthright citizenship issue. That's controversial.
Very. The proposal discussed is ending automatic citizenship for children born in the U.S. if their parents are here illegally or just visiting. Proponents say it aligns with most other countries and removes a major incentive for illegal entry.
Finally, transparency. Making sure the public knows the real data, the real costs.
Yes, that's stressed. Though, interestingly, critics cited in some material point out that the Trump administration also dissolved some internal DHS oversight bodies, like one focused on immigration detention. So there's a tension there.
Yeah, balancing enforcement with oversight. That's always a challenge, isn't it?
Definitely. How do you ensure policies are tough but also fair and accountable? It's a constant balancing act.
So, wrapping this up, what this deep dive really highlights, based on the sources we've explored, is a choice. A choice between policies focused squarely on border security, rule of law, and what proponents call the economic interests of American citizens. And policies that, according to critics in these sources, led to more strained resources and, well, border chaos. The drastic drop in illegal crossings reported under the recent changes seems to be presented as evidence that strong enforcement can work.
Right. The sources clearly suggest that policy decisions have very real, very immediate consequences for national security, for communities, for the feeling of order versus chaos.
It really makes you think. So, as you consider all this, here's a final thought based on our dive today. Is the potential economic growth some argue comes from mass immigration worth the potential costs, the cost described in these sources, to American workers and border integrity?
And maybe, what's the fundamental responsibility of a nation? Is it primarily to secure its own borders and prioritize its own citizens?
Definitely something to chew on. Thanks for joining us on the Deep Dive. We'll see you next time.